Excellent. Hi. Welcome to Boost Your Brand and Build Your Story workshop. My name is Diva Moore, and this is my one of my best business friends, Miss Mary Moth, who is hosting this event. Mary, would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. This is actually the first event. You're the first guest that has been hosted by the Writers Haven, which is a new virtual space for writers. And we had a little reel, but that's okay. You can still reach out to me for a personalized tour of the Writer's Haven. It has space for group meetings, for individual reading and reflection. If you like to write on the beach, we have a space for you to do that. So you'll definitely want to reach out to me and check that out. I am Mary Moss, aka the Word Wizard. I help you divinely design your words to heal the world because the world needs our stories. They're not for us, they're for the world. Having said that, Diva, Miss Darlene Moore, is one of my dearest business buddies. She's a true friend. She has been an inspiration to me, not only as a coach and an entrepreneur, but just as a human being. Ever since I met her, she's going to get all kerfluffled now because she doesn't like anybody to talk about her, but it's true. She has recently completed her master's degree. I'm not even going to try to use all the words in the degree. She can tell you that, but she's super smart, even super smarter than she was before she finished it. And she's going to be talking today about one of my favorite topics, something I've been telling entrepreneurs they need to do to supercharge their business, and that is to use storytelling, because storytelling engages multiple parts of our brain that are not engaged when we just use a rote discussion, words on a page, the way we typically talk about our products and services. But she's not only covering business, she's covering how to literally boost your brand, build your story. And I can't wait. Please have a pen and paper, have your tablet ready, however you take notes, you are going to want to. So buckle up. You're in for a treat.
Thank you so much for that, Mary. Oh, wow, that's awesome. I am Diva Moore. I am an organizational psychologist. I do have a master's degree in human relations and organization development. By organization, I mean, anytime you have two or three together, you have an organization, whether you know it or not. Um, I am mainly a success strategist. I help people put together a strategy to transform their lives, and it almost always starts with their story. So I'd like to get right into it because your time is valuable. So first, I want to start off by just even talking about what does storytelling even mean? I mean, are we talking about Hansel and Gretel while we're talking about our products? Do I don't have time to tell a whole story to someone when I meet them and I want to talk about my business? Diva, what do you mean by storytelling? Well, here's some questions because any good story starts with a good question, right? So here's one. Why does your business exist? The answer should be a story, right? Now, if your answer is just to make money, that's not a story. Yes, you're in business to make money, but your ability to make money does not translate to your customer. You need to make a connection with them. So, why does your brand exist? What was the reason you got that started? Why should someone invest in you? The answer to that question is a story. And how you craft that story and deliver that story really does impact how you're received in the public and how loyal your customers may or may not be to you. Okay, moving on. And one of the biggest tools that you're going to bring to any organization is going to be your gift of storytelling. Like I said, an organization is any number of people where you have two or three together. That's right. The Bible talks about organizations too. So your organization can be your family. It can be your team at work. It could be your group of ushers that you work with in your church. It can even be, get this, you, yourself, and you, right? You know how we say me, myself, and I? Because the self talk that we give each other, that we give ourselves, is a story. Now, think about that. When you're talking to yourself, whether it's positive or negative, you are telling yourself a story, right? Let me give you an example. I work with people who say, I'm not really smart enough to do that. Well, why not? Well, you know, I that would be something that I'd be really good at, but my my family told me that I was never good in math. So, I could never be a great accountant because I hate math. Why do you hate math? Well, because there's always something, there's a story behind the things that we feel, the emotions that we feel, and the way we react to the world. Now, me myself, I've successfully coached startup entrepreneurs for the past 10 years. I also have coached the unhomed community as they've transitioned back into society. And in both of those cases, very basic in the coaching is helping them to craft a story. Because if you cannot tell someone a story to connect them to your why, in today's really fast-paced world, they're going to keep on going. Now, in advertising, storytelling refers to the practice of employing a narrative to convey a message, right? So I'm going to read you the definition of a brand narrative, and this is according to Forbes magazine. It says that a brand narrative is a concise, streamlined story that acts as the platform for an organization's marketing and communications. It is not a script for you to repeat verbatim, but a messaging framework for you to interpret and communicate as needed through your own unique lens. Wow. Let's take that apart really quick. So it's concise and streamlined. Right there, you know that you're going to have to put in some work. Why? Because you're going to streamline the story. You're going to start with your original story, the long winded version, and you're going to pare that down into something that gets right to the point of why your brand exists or why your service is so valuable to the community, right? Then you want to say that that story acts as a platform for the organization's marketing and communications. Now, obviously, your family may not be marketing, right? But your family does have some communications going on there. What's your family story? Right? How your family perceives themselves and what the family story is really does affect the way you communicate with each other, both or whether it's your children, your parents, your brothers and sisters, or your cousins. It really does. Those shared experiences that create the stories help create the connections. Let me know when you're not following me anymore, okay? Um, because it's not a script, it really should be something that's authentic to you, right? Stories are very personal. And that's why you kind of have to write your own story for your own brand. Then it says it's a messaging framework. And that's a great way to think of it, a messaging framework. If you are like me and you use an email service such as Constant Contact or something like that, then you know that the written narrative really gets employed a lot as we look at a lot of print and a lot of websites. But what you say and how you tell your story is just as equally important as what's on the written page. The story, the very act of storytelling is ancient. right? Oral storytelling is how we, before there was paper, before there was writing, it was how we knew as a species who we were. It is still a framework, though, and it's something that in business is not being utilized enough or as effectively as it could be. Now, I keep saying this, I'm going to say it again. Storytelling creates a connection, and that connection can be really emotional, you know. Um, it should be value driven in that connection, a connection that is emotional and value driven, that connects you and your brand to your customer, is where that story is really going to hit home. I want to give you some examples of how this works, right? Because most of the time, your story has absolutely nothing to do with your business. Okay. I'm going to give you an example. Um, the one that everyone likes to use is Nike, right? And how they use a slogan to tell a story. And we all know Nike's slogan, just do it, right? But their actual story deals with how a guy was at a golf course. And I thought I had that whole story here, and I don't. I do apologize. But whether or not you're on a golf course or not, the end of the day is just do it tells a story in 3 words, right? What it does, it says it doesn't matter whether you're an Olympian, it doesn't matter if you're a weekend warrior, it doesn't matter if you're trying to write a book, it doesn't matter whatever it is that you're doing, just do it. It tells a story, and everyone in the world connects with just do it because we all procrastinate at something. That is great storytelling. 3 words, a story in 3 words. They're the one that everyone uses. In fact, you know what? I got the whole golf thing wrong. Warby Parker is my second example. And Warby Parker, the founder of Warby Parker, lost his glasses on a back hiking trip with his buddies. Now, I wear contacts. I've worn glasses since I was 2 years old. Anybody who wears glasses understands how expensive it is to replace a pair of glasses. We all get that. And what Warby Parker has done has taken that story of a really bad idea, a really bad circumstance, losing glasses in the woods, and turned it into, well, look, we've made buying glasses cheaper, easier, faster than it ever has been, and you're going to get a better selection. Again, they're telling a story, and that story gives you an emotional connection to their brand. If the story's not for you, you don't get that connection. If you don't wear glasses or know someone who wears glasses, that story means absolutely nothing for you. And in that way, you also have weeded out people who are not even in your demographic. Great storytelling there. Then my absolute favorite one, the greatest story ever told. Okay. Here's how I like to put it. Here's how you can tie your storytelling to a logo. Whether you are a Christian or not, if you see a cross, you know the story behind it. I'm going to give you a minute for that. That's right. And it's, even though you don't want to think of the church or a religion as having great storytelling or branding, that's exactly what it is. These stories have lasted for thousands of years, and it even has a logo. The cross, or the symbol of the fish, represents around the world Christianity, just like the crescent and sickle around the world stands for the Muslim faith, and so on. But there's stories connected to those logos, and those stories have lasted for thousands of years. And why? Because they were great marketing, because they had the right structure to them, and because they were geared toward the people that they needed, that they wanted to bring into their faith, which is the great part of great storytelling. Before I move on, did anyone have any questions for me? As we move on into talking about what the benefits of storytelling? No? Then we're going to move right on. So, believe it or not, one of the top soft skills that employers today even look for are storytelling skills, because storytelling is associated with improved performance, with personal and professional growth, and with success in the workplace. Why? Because it allows for critical thinking and structured thinking, because you have to structure your stories, right? Stories do evoke emotion and inspire action, both of which are necessary for employee commitment and engagement, and for you to get change initiatives done. If your employees are not engaged, it's hard to get work done, let alone make any changes. So, um, being a great storyteller as a leader, even, is both written and oral, is a great tool to have in your entrepreneur toolbox. Emotional intelligence can also be cultivated through storytelling, believe it or not. So, all of these things are big words, big concepts into, wow, how do I fit this into my brand, right? How do I make this work for my brand? First, that I would suggest is to decide what type of story fits your brand, right? Now, we're going to go over 4 different types of stories. The first one is the origin story, the value story, a vulnerability story, and then a personal story. We're going to go through them separately, but understand that they can intertwine each other, right? And I'll give you some examples as we go. So let's start with an origin story. Um, an origin story creates an actual context for your brand. It's factual, it's emotional, and it has some type of ideological truth. And it really is your why, right? A great story to put here of an origin story is Tom's. Tom's the shoes are sustainable shoes. You buy one pair, you give another, they give a pair to someone in need. That story of Tom's is very much an origin story, where they started from. A lot of times in business, as we go through our businesses, we forget why we've started. And almost every time you ask someone why they started, you start getting to the passion of their brand, of their business, and their reason why. That passion inspires people to want to work with them or buy from them. So, when creating your origin story, it does make sense to sit down and write out your why. Now, let's talk about write out. Much of what I'm going to say, yes, these are things that you can do orally. Of course, story, that's the beauty of storytelling. It should work both written and orally. But everything that I'm telling you about you writing your story is literally that. You should have written this down. Okay. It's going to help clarify your thoughts. It's going to help get more concise in your thinking and your descriptions of the services and the challenges and the benefits of your brand, your business, and the services that you offer. Okay. So that's a great example. Well, that's one type of story. I'm sorry, an origin story. Secondly, you want to have a value story. You want to share your values with your customers and shine a light on your culture. An example of that would be Ebony Magazine. Ebony Magazine is has a very specific demographic: Black women. Okay, so Black women are going to be the ones that they. This just really freaked me out. The time check here. Um, Black women are their demographic, and therefore, Ebony Magazine has a story about why they add value. The story of Ebony is the owner's wife of Ebony went out, could not find magazines that looked like her, that offered beauty advice to people who looked like her. And so she wanted a magazine that offered Black women and women of color beauty products and magazine articles that addressed their needs, wants, and desires. And there's Ebony Magazine. That's a great example right there. Moving on, a story type for another story type for brand storytelling is the vulnerability story. These stories are great. They drive emotional impact by shedding light on something that might not be normally shared with the world. They humanize experiences to allow your audience to relate and connect. Soon as I say this, we're all going to remember it and just shake our heads. But the best vulnerability story that's on the market today is the I was going to say the shelter, the animal. What is the name of it? I can't think of the name of it right now. But it's a Sheryl Crow sings for them, and they come out and they show the animals. Oh, the animals are starving and shivering. Oh, help the vulnerable animals. The animals are out there. They're not hurting anyone. They can't control it. Look at the cruel humans. And thank you very much. The ASPCA does an awesome job of humanizing animals, making people see animals through their eyes, shedding light on the way humans treat animals in those circumstances. And that vulnerability, so that is one example. But you can also get personally vulnerable, right? And I'll talk about that in one moment, because I'm going to show you with my own story how you can combine stories. The final story type that I want to talk about today is a personal story. And that's when you're sharing stories about you or your organization that about you and your organization that connect to the organization story itself. Nike is a good example of that, but I'm going to share with you my own personal example of how personal branding and personal storytelling really helps your brand. So what I'm going to share with you is both a vulnerability story and a personal story, right? So the name of my consultant firm is Living with Divitude LLC. And people will ask me, why did you start that? How did you get that name? Okay, and here comes the story. So, in 1986, my almost 2-year-old daughter was murdered, and I had a really hard time readjusting to life after that. And because of that, I really understood what it was to have to try to rebuild your life from something so absolutely devastating that most people don't even think of. And through the years of just abject grief and alcoholism, and just really, really being guilt ridden by the death of my daughter, it made it very hard for me to move forward. And finally, someone walked up to me and said, "You know what, Diva? At some point, it stops being a reason and it starts to be an excuse." And that became my mantra for many, many years. I don't want it to be an excuse. There's a reason and there's an excuse. And it really motivated me to move forward. And then just when I was right at a period where I had done everything that I could at that point without really being uncomfortable myself, I remembered something that my grandfather used to say. And he used to say, "Honey, you cannot get on your feet until you get off your ass." And I wrote a whole book about that. And that really, those two sayings At some reason, it stops being a reason, it starts being an excuse, and you have to get off your ass to get on your feet. Those two sayings made me realize that there are certain women out here who need straight talk, no chaser, to just jar them into getting their lives together. And then they need to be guided through the minefield that gets them back to a normal life. And that's where it started from. Excuse me. I apologize. So, yeah, that's where that all came from. That is a great example of combining a vulnerability story, because I'm sharing some of the most personal things that have happened to me in my life. Answer a personal story together to make a brand storytelling. Now, obviously, I'm not going to make a commercial with all of that information, right? But when someone says, hey, what your consultancy is about, you know what? I help people get off their ass and get on their feet. There's a story behind that logo. So what happens now? I see that for some reason this session is telling me that it's running out, Mary. I don't know what that means. So we're going to keep going and hopefully it won't cut off on us. How can you be a better brand storyteller? Well, you really should not, if you're telling it from the brand standpoint, stay in your brand persona. So, for example, if you run children's parties, you don't want to have a story that's super serious, right? All the way through it, at least, right? So make sure that the tone of your story, your brand story, follows the tone of your business. You definitely want to do that. You want to keep the story simple. I just spent 5 minutes telling you my vulnerability and personal story, but I'm able to simplify that by saying, hey, I help people get off their ass and get on their feet. Right? And it's a great tagline because it invites people to ask me, what do you mean by that? And isn't that what we all want as business owners, for someone to ask us about our business so that we can explain to them what it is and show them our passion as we're explaining? Right. You also want to tell better stories. You want to make stories that other people want to tell, right? You want to go and tell someone, I just was on this live with this redheaded Black woman who talked about how the death of her daughter inspired her to become an organizational psychologist. Your story has to get that emotional connection so that people connect to your brand as well. Now, we have 2 minutes in this session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this session in, and then I'm going to come back, hopefully. And I have 5 sets of questions to help you build your brand story. Miss Mary, if you would come back on camera with me, just in case, because I'm seeing, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's saying end second session, and I don't know what that means.
I'm not sure either.
But thank goodness I had this in two sets.
That's
So,
right.
right. If it ends, we just move to the next one. Tish, you are wonderful, darling. You are wonderful. Great, because I put together some questions for you guys to help get you started writing your own brand story. I said this was a workshop.
Hey.
So I want to give you some prompts that will get you started. And here's where you're going to need to pull out your paper and your pen. Okay, so we're going to take a moment. We've got 20 seconds in this session. I want to make sure that I don't start and it cuts everybody off. So this is exciting. Oh, you're so sweet. Does anyone have any feedback so far? Am I going too fast? Or do you have any questions about how your brand really, oh dear.